evening, folks. Welcome to Citizens of the World. I thank you every week for joining me here. And as you know, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. Again, I thank you for joining me every week, your host, Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Well, with that said, folks, let's take a moment and just recognize the Super Bowl game that took place on Sunday of this past week. What an incredible game. And of course, I'm not too biased. When I was a kid, I used to sell popcorn and soda at Yankee Stadium for the Giants, so you can imagine who I was rooting for. But that aside, it was an incredible game. And last week, we just had, to tie it into a little bit into Palm Beach County, last week in the Shiny Sheet, Doug Reel, a friend and a realtor in the island of Palm Beach, working for Century 21, is quoted on being so proud that the Century 21 has spent three 30-second spots at $3.5 million for each spot. Well, that's a whole lot of money. Round figures, $10 million. And I have to tell you, they weren't the best commercials on the television. The best commercials were way beyond the Century 21. But at any rate, it was fun to see and the connection to Palm Beach County. It was fun to watch the game. It was an incredible game. I hope you all enjoyed it. And now, on with the show. As you know, every week we try to cover three basic topics with our dialogue. The first topic is using immigration law as a precursor and as a platform for economic development. The second topic is to recognize that culture is a predetermination for economic development. And finally, we try to justify in some way, shape, or form that Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County is in fact the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere. I know that gets a chuckle because nobody recognizes that, but I offer you my general strategy, and that is take a compass, put it in my desk right here, draw a circle with a 5,000-mile radius, and Boca Raton is in the middle of the Western Hemisphere. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. So today, we're going to follow up a little bit on what we started last week. As you remember, last week we were able to do an interview with Jorge Pesquera from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. The Convention and Visitors Bureau realizes most of its funding from the bed tax here in the county. So this week I thought we would follow that up and we would invite Roger Amadin, the man who heads up the Tourist Development Council, to chat with us a little bit and tell us the basis for the tax rate, tell us how it's spent across the board with the various agencies, and explore some of the tourist-driven opportunities that are economic drivers here in Palm Beach County. So when I return after this brief break, we'll have a moment, and Roger Amadel will join me. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, folks, and Roger, thank you very much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me.
As you heard while you were in the green room, actually a white room, but when you were in the green room, last week I had the opportunity to talk to Jorge Pesquera, the head of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and he opened up a whole lot of ideas in terms of what the CDB is doing to attract tourism, and that just begged for me to ask you to come and chat a little bit about the Tourist Development Council and how that works. For purposes of the audience, the Tourist Development Council is a quasi-government agency that works in conjunction with Palm Beach County's government, and it charges a bed tax to all visitors that come into the county, and uses the proceeds of that bed tax to fund various agencies that are designed to attract tourism in culture and sport and various other things. Roger's the man that heads that up. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of an overview of what that is?
It'd be a pleasure to.
Thank you.
But first of all, I have to probably restate that the gentleman that was interviewed last week, Jorge Pesquera, the president and CEO of the Convention Visitors Bureau for Palm Beach County, was also recognized as one of the top 25 intriguing minds within the United States as it relates to sales and marketing.
Yes, I did see that article.
So it was pretty amazing. I wanted to make that point known because it's well deserving. And Jorge is a tremendous guy to work with, very creative, very energetic. And it really has helped Palm Beach County attract more tourists to our area. But the Tourist Development Council is the advisory board to our elected officials or the Board of County Commissioners. And our board is made up of 7 appointees, one from each one of the Board of County Commissioners. And we collect 5% as far as what's considered a bed tax. So it's $100, you get $5 for each $100 that a guest stays overnight is charged. That 5% bed tax is collected, and last year, the fiscal year 2011, we collected $25 million. Of that $25 million, $15 million goes directly back to these agencies that Ed talked about: the Convention Visitors Bureau, the Cultural Council, the Sports Commission, and the Film Institute, or the Film Commission. So there's $15 million that goes right back into marketing. Now we also have a funding function there with the Environmental Resource Management, or beach renourishment. They also receive a couple $1 million each year. Then there's 2 other areas that receive bed tax funding, and that is to pay off our convention center. There's a bond that was floated out there for $84 million. Also another bond to pay off Roger Dean Stadium. 2 assets within the county that are very important to attract tourists. So it makes Jorge's job and these other agencies' jobs a little bit easier to attract people.
Roger Dean Stadium, for the audience, houses the spring training, is the spring training facility for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Florida Marlins.
Now the Miami Marlins.
Yes.
New logo, new stadium.
Miami Marlins.
But I do want to point out too, this is going to be a phenomenal year for Roger Dean Stadium. Their records, they've already experienced record sales because of the World Series champions being the St. Louis Cardinals. And the last time this happened was in 2006 when they won the World Series. The following spring training, which starts right now and through the end of March, was a huge success not only for the stadium but also for the county.
Well, that suggests, folks, that we're going to have to get the head of the Sports Commission in to talk about that in the next few weeks. But in the meantime, let's go back to tourism in general. It's a main industry for Palm Beach County. And before we got on the air, you told me a statistic about the number of jobs created equals, how many jobs equals, how many tourists equal 1 job. And we got to talking, and I'd like you to use that as a segue into the increase in tourism that would be expected for to happen when the federal government expands the visa waiver programs to countries like Brazil.
And that whole visa waiver program now is very exciting, as we've talked about before, and I'm sure Jorge Pesquera was able to cover a lot of that last time. But getting back to the jobs, it is the leading industry within Palm Beach County, and we have just about 70,000 jobs associated with the tourism hospitality sector. And for every 85 new visitors to Palm Beach County, creates 1 tourism-related job. So if we can increase the number of visitors, we currently have about 4 million visitors to our county each year. If we can increase that number by 10%, that would create close to 5,000 new jobs in the tourism-related sector.
That's incredible. I know that you have been working over the last few years on a year-over-year basis. You've seen a dramatic increase in tourism in Palm Beach County this past year.
We have, and we're always seeing what we can do of how we can beat the previous year. And each year we've been able to do that. We experienced a incredible crash in our tourism-related activities in 2009. As the economy went down, that certainly affected our industry, and we call that the AIG effect. Our bed tax collections went down year over year in 2009 by 22%.
The county commission supplemented you with some funding that year to help offset that.
That is correct. We actually went to the county commissioners and made a presentation of our need for $3 million. Those dollars were in a reserve account, and we need to get $3 million to invest back into marketing. We do know that for every dollar invested in marketing, returns about $177 per visitor in the spend. So the ROI on $3 million was easily recorded and easily communicated to the Board of County Commissioners. We received a unanimous vote for them to release $3 million to these bed tax funded agencies to reinvest in marketing. And it was a huge success. We fell the furthest in the entire state in 2009. But we have now seen dramatic increases year over year, and this past year we achieved 65% occupancy, where last year we were at 61%.
If I remember my definitions correctly, the definition of a tourist in Palm Beach County is someone who spends at least one night in a hotel or a motel from some other place.
Yeah, anybody traveling 50 miles or more, or someone that comes into the county and stays overnight is a tourist.
Now, the focus for the end of this segment on how we are seeing an increase in international tourism and where that's coming from.
Well, we're going to be really focused in on the Brazilian market and also on the European market. We did see a significant increase of tourists visiting Florida from the Brazilian market. However, with the ease of the visa waiver program, I think we're going to see more and more of those Brazilians visiting Palm Beach County, because we know they will come into Florida. They want to go to Miami and Orlando. It's going to be our job at the CBB to get them to pull off in between going to or from Orlando and Miami into Palm Beach.
That would be exit 99 on the Florida Turnpike.
Hey, there's 26 exits in Palm Beach County. Pick one of them, because it all starts with a visit.
To bring us to closure, there's a number of things that have hit the paper recently. One, marine tourism is up, and two, equestrian. There's a lot of activity going on out in the Wellington area for the equestrian center. If that comes to bear, will we get even greater activity from the equestrian marketplace?
Absolutely. We already see a significant number of Brazilians and visitors from Argentina who are visiting the equestrian center, which is the capital, the world capital of equestrian activities. So as soon as this visa waiver program gets enacted, which is going to be very soon, we're going to see more and more visitors from that particular area. As it relates to the marine industries, that is one of the initiatives by the CVB, or the Convention Visitors Bureau, to really focus our efforts on that. We have so many aquatic assets right here in our beautiful county. We have the big, beautiful ocean, the intercoastal waterway, and then the other coast, which is the Okeechobee, Lake Okeechobee.
So we have both freshwater and saltwater.
That's correct.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come down here today and sharing some of your thoughts. I appreciate it very much. We air, and I'll send you a copy of the tape.
Look forward to it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We'll be right back, folks.
The second way of doing this is to go by the taxable income method. Under this method, if you have a very high margin on the product, you're going to be using your taxable income, because if there's a product with markups of 50, 60, 100%, you will be taking 50% of those very high markups. Now, in addition to those percentages of taxable income, in both that gross receipts method and the taxable income method, the DISC is allowed to also deduct or take as a dividend a certain amount of export promotion expenses, which are those expenses incurred to advance the distribution of the product. This is in the chart described as commission payments. The third method is to go back to the old method, and if it's most profitable just to charge the disc a commission, the same as one would charge any third party, and that will be the biggest deduction, then that's the commission that can be chosen. All of this is shown in the final chart that shows a comparison of a company with a very high profit percentage versus a company with a relatively low profit percentage. And if you walk through the numbers, you're able to see how one would apply these different formulas to work best for them in the particular tax situation that the producer has. So that sums up the short understanding of the disc, how it works, how the commission payments work. The commission payments are deductions from the exporter's taxable income, and how the dual tax benefit of the complete deferral of taxation on disc profits, coupled with only a very small charge of an interest payment based upon the Treasury note, can be coupled with changing 35% income into taxable dividend income of 15%, can mean a big difference to the bottom line. Now, another very little known fact that practitioners have been advising is the amount of deferral that one can have in a disc is on $10 million worth of profits a year. One shouldn't be misled to believe that the disc benefits only go up to $10 million in profits a year, because after the 10 million number, even though the disc profits can no longer be deferred, they are automatically considered to be paid out as dividends in the year they're received. So consequently, as to funds profits in excess of 10 million, while the deferral benefit is not there, what is there is the ability to turn 35% taxable income into 15% qualified dividend income. And this disc is a tool for the small and the large exporter, licensor, royalty earner, wholesaler, retailer. It's simple to operate, simple to establish, simple rules to live by, and something that the American business person is going to wake up and start taking advantage of.
Well, welcome back, folks, and thank you, Richard. Your tax tips are getting more and more interesting on a weekly basis. I hope the audience appreciates the depth of knowledge that you're providing to them. I'd like to switch now, folks, and go into fireworks in politics. And this is our time I get to make some commentary. This past week, we saw an incredible musical chairs episode here in Florida, and particularly in Palm Beach County, which is where we're focused. And what's going on is every 10 years, the state goes through a redistricting. So we are now in the redistricting. Last year, the people of the state also voted for 2 amendments which sort of changed the formula for how you actually do the redistricting in an effort to avoid the gerrymandering that generally takes place to provide the incumbent with a safe ground. So there's been a lot of dialogue, a lot of anxiety over how these borders and these areas are going to be drawn. Last week we saw what looks like maybe the near end of this process. And that has seen a couple of things happen. First of all, We have Congressional District 22 here, which is currently held by Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, who is a Republican, very conservative voice, freshman, came in 2010, made a name for himself, and has now become the biggest target of the Democrats to take out of office. The district that he's in has been shifted, now adding a significant disadvantage to his being able to win his seat back because it's heavily weighted in Democrats. So everybody's wondering what Colonel West is going to do. The new districts that have come have caused another congressman, Congressman Rooney, to have to reconsider his location. So what we saw last week was Congressman West has taken himself out of District 22 and is now going to run in District 18, and Congressman Rooney is taking himself out of District 18 and going to run in District 17, causing him to have to move further west, actually to the West Coast. And that has also caused the race for the U.S. Senate, currently the seat held by Democratic Senator Nelson, to shift as well. There were 4 competitors running in the primary for Nelson's seat, and Adam Hasner, a local favorite down here in the Boca Raton area, formerly part of the Florida legislature, the House leader actually a few years back, was running for the Senate seat. Now with Alan West shifting out, he has announced now that he is going to run for Congressional District 22. He is the only announced Republican at this point in time, and that puts him in line to have to run against one of 2 primary opponents, Lois Frankel, the former mayor of West Palm Beach, and Patrick Murphy, a businessman down in the Broward County area. At any rate, the musical chairs have been very interesting, and we will keep you abreast on the politics of that. A second item I wanted to talk about under the banner of fireworks and politics is the casino gaming bill that has been bantered about recently in the Florida legislature. It appears that that bill is dead this session for a number of reasons, not the least of which is it's still difficult to get an advancement of gaming opportunities in the state of Florida, even though gaming and gambling are expanding significantly in the state of Florida. But the politics seems to have won the day, and the casino gambling bill will not pass this year. It's expected to run again next year. However, here in southeast Florida, the Seminole tribe, the Native Indian tribe, are dancing with glee because they've just expanded some of their operations and continue to make news with regards to the expansion of gaming, and their Coconut Creek location has been completely revamped. It's just an amazing operation. Between that and the dog tracks, there is a ton of gambling here in the state of Florida, so don't worry about it, come on down. Now, moving on to KOs and koodoos, or koodoos and KOs. First kudu I want to give this week is actually up in Palm Beach on the island, and that is to the Flagler Museum. They have done some very significant things. On February 7th, which is actually earlier this evening, they presented the Stradivari Quartet. And the other day, on February 5th, they did a whole lecture on their Whitehall lecture series on the circles in the sky, which was their presentation on George Ferris and the amazing wheel that he created back in the 1890s. Last year when I was at Disney in Paris, I actually had an opportunity to see some of the literature on that wheel. It was an amazing event. I commend the Flagler Museum for bringing these series forward and for giving people an opportunity to see them at little or no cost. KO. The Donald, a couple of weeks ago we commended him for his activities, and we talked about Celine Dion being a performer for the Mar-a-Lago Club. Well, it was announced that Celine Dion had to cancel due to an unexpected illness, and that really was a disappointment, so a KO goes on there. Wellington, you noticed earlier when I spoke with Roger Amadin that Wellington has approved in part, the new equestrian center. Major advancement. You know, some people say that horses from over 32 countries are in Palm Beach County during the equestrian season, and they say that for every one horse that crosses the border to come to do the equestrian events, 6 people travel with that animal. So equestrian is a huge opportunity for us. And finally, we have to watch ourselves, folks, over in the Middle East again. Egypt, which was a very friendly country to us prior to the events of the last 18 months, is now not such a friendly country. And U.S. tourists have been kidnapped recently, putting people in danger and causing the tourism industry in Egypt to be affected dramatically. Now, with all of that said, I want to go to a double kudu. The World Trade Center Miami in Miami, headed up by Charlotte Caligli, is doing their annual State of the Ports briefing this week, and it's an incredible show. It will be held on, let's see, where is it? It will be held on Wednesday, February 15th, next week, at the Miami Airport Convention Center on Northwest 72nd Avenue. And it has over 1,000 international trade and business people in attendance. It's just, last year I went, it was an incredible event. I will go again this year. My intention is to go again this year. It is clearly the gateway to Latin and South America, and we are part of that MSA. So I commend them for doing that. And finally, I'm going to wrap the show up with just again going back to the Super Bowl. Next week I will present a video on an American company that uses the football as its main industry and how it keeps all of its jobs here in the United States. At any rate, I thank you very much for joining me, and I want you to remember that we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, here in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Good night. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Citizens of the World. I thank you for joining me each week, and as you know, we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you again for joining me each week. Al Zucaro from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, here in sunny South Palm Beach County. And we always take a look at a pointed view of politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. As you know, each week we try to break the show into 3 or 4 segments. Today I want to take a moment in my intro to talk about what was an incredibly chilling event. About a week or 10 days ago, there was an accident on one of our interstates here. Interstate 75, which actually runs on the west side of the state. And in that accident, a family by the name of Carmo were involved, and Mr. and Mrs. Carmo lost their lives there. And their daughter, Lidiana Carmo, who was 15 years old, survived. Here is a young lady who has now experienced the trauma of losing her parents in an accident and was faced with the possibility of actually being deported. This is a young lady that was brought to the United States when she was 3 years old, when her parents came here. They came on a temporary visa, which long since expired. They came from the country of Brazil, and they overstayed. This is the exact kind of person that is the object or the objective of the DREAM Act. And it's interesting, over my years as an immigration attorney, I've always noticed something very specific. The Immigration Service, now Homeland Security, would always be very cut and dry with the law, regardless of the circumstance, until the circumstance caused public awareness and newspaper coverage and things of that nature. So this young lady, who should be facing deportation, is not. And I'll quote from the story. It says, "Our thoughts and prayers are for Lydiane as she deals with the tragic loss of her family." These are statements made by Barbara Gonzalez, a spokesman from Homeland Security, their ICE division in Washington. "Reports of her facing deportation are completely false. ICE has no interest in her case." Well, I can see the humanitarian issue here. What this is called, it's a deferred action. The Homeland Security and ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, are taking the position that they will not act on this behalf, against this woman or this young lady, and deport her. I think that's commendable. But I also think it's undisciplined, and I think that the DREAM Act needs to be brought forward, and it needs to be negotiated by both sides of the aisle, and we really need to do something about these young children who are here through no fault of their own and are not the people that committed the crime or committed the infraction that leads them to be here in an undocumented status, but they are truly second-class residents here because they are limited in what they can do and what they can't do. I thought I would bring that up before we move on today. Today's show is going to be very interesting. We have talked in the past about the idea of a silver visa or a gray visa, the kind of opportunity that would invite people from other countries of means who want to come here, who want to vacation here, stay for extended periods of time, have the means to do it, and have no desire to be employed or work in the United States. One of the leading voices for that, both at the Florida Association of Realtors and at the National Association of Realtors, is my friend, Realtor Tony Macaluso. I've invited Tony here. He'll be in, we'll bring him in right after the break, and we're going to talk about the benefits of foreign nationals coming and how they can improve the real estate market here in the southeast sector of Florida, and for that matter, throughout the entire United States. We'll be right back, folks. Thank you very much. Well, welcome back, folks, and joining me on the set right now is Tony Macaluso. Tony, thank you very much for coming. I love your tie. It's got all the countries of the world.
It does.
I made a mistake one day. I went to visit the Bohemian Council in Miami, and I'm wearing a flag tie like that, and prominent in the front of the flag, on the front of the tie, is the Jamaican thing in the council. I'm out there asking her a question, asking her for a favor. And halfway through the thing, she says, "I noticed the Jamaican flag, but I don't see the flag from the Bahamas." Needless to say, needless to say, I didn't get what I was asking for. At any rate, I have peppered the audience and told them about your background as an international realtor and how you've traveled the world and lectured and been a professor at various institutions around the world on real estate. Could you elaborate a little further and give the audience a little brief background on how you got...
Starting in the late 90s really was the beginning of a lot of my more intense international activities, and it was really the Eastern European Real Property Foundation that was the catalyst to go over to these countries that didn't know about property rights, didn't know from title, didn't have a viable market, and here they had freedom now, and they wanted to be able to capitalize. And my thoughts were kind of patriotic, that if we can teach people how to make money and how we live and how they can enjoy real estate and it can be profitable, that we probably wouldn't see them in the trenches in another 20 years. And as we know, we've had 2 major wars coming out of Europe in the last century, and it was important to give them the transition into ownership. And so a lot of the stuff I did was in Poland and Hungary and Slovakia and Ukraine and Georgia, and we went twice into Russia talking to them. And as a result of our activities, we gave birth to real estate organizations like the Russian Guild of Realtors and the Hungarian Realtors. So we started forming private entities instead of having everything controlled by the government. Over there it was the Ministry of Building, built on the Ministry of Housing, allocated who was going to live in them. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of the old guard, it was all based on corruption. So if you wanted a good job, you paid somebody. If you wanted a good apartment, you paid somebody. And that's kind of not the way we see things as being upright and forthright. So
That's translated into lots of communities here in South Florida from those countries.
Much bigger. The foundation changed its name to the International Property Foundation. And this past year, I was over doing the National Association of Realtor India's conference in Hyderabad, India, and we were in Nairobi, Kenya, again in the Eastern African Real Estate Center, and this was taught at the Kenya Institute for Monetary Studies. So they are keenly interested in being able to transition from sort of an agricultural-based economy, very loosely defined, into a much more thriving economy that would fit into the world as we know it today. And so things have accelerated, and you're absolutely right about the amount of traffic that has been enjoyed by the international realtors here in the United States. One of the stats I was just reading, because I also serve on the research committee for the National Association of Realtors, is the fact that in 2010 we did about $66 billion of real estate activity that came into the country. And 2011 eclipsed that to $82 billion.
Wow.
And of that $82 billion, we're here in Florida. Florida got about $20 billion of that. We get about 1 out of every 4 international transactions comes into the state of Florida, followed by California, Texas, Arizona, and New York.
Are you seeing in your analysis bulk buyers of real estate, or is that $20 billion here in Florida, individuals buying units?
It's probably the bulk, using your word, are individuals. But we did see in the last couple of years that we saw some sovereign funds that came in and were looking to buy blocks of condos that hadn't been sold or whatever. But the vast majority are individuals looking to come here for a vacation home, to retire, maybe to immigrate, depending on their circumstance. But the bigger purchases are coming through the sovereign wealth, and what we've seen them shooting for, rather than resale condos, which they buy in bulk, is commercial properties, which, as you know, we're selling some of these centers for less than the cost to rebuild them.
Right.
And they see the value in that because these kind of opportunities in Europe or in Asia don't exist. And so with our decline in values and the opportunities that present themselves here, and here's the other interesting stat, which definitely makes a lot of realtors very happy. The numbers have been going up over the last 5 years. It started off with 28% paid cash. This last year, 62% of the buyers coming in internationally were cash buyers.
Really?
Which means they didn't have to use our dysfunctional banking system, which is really, a major plus for dealing with them, because the money's there. Now they become Americanized after their second or third purchase and realize they could use their money to leverage to do something larger. But generally, those initial purchases, the vast majority are cash.
Let's talk about that for a second. You spent a lot of time in the last decade trying to lobby Congress for, I'll call it a silver visa, but I'm not sure whether you call it a silver or a gray visa.
Yeah.
And basically a visa opportunity that would allow foreign nationals to come here and not have to be harassed and leave every 6 months or every X amount of days. Tell us a little bit about the background on that.
Well, I tried to introduce this back, and it was just before 9/11, and after 9/11, no one really wanted to talk about immigration in any any depth. That was really a subject that evoked a lot of emotion. But the fact is, we did originally call it a gray visa, but nobody wants to know that they're gray. They'd rather be silver, as you probably can concur. And really what it was an opportunity for us to have a stimulus without the price tag. It was an opportunity for people to retire here in the United States without using government programs, not supplanting an American's job because they'd be truly retired. They provide their own health care, which is pretty similar to what the F visas or student visas require. So not very significantly different. The biggest difference would be that we're not going to tax them on their worldwide income after they spend more than 180 days here. And right now there was no way, there still isn't a way, of the 80 varieties of visas, there's very few that allow people to stay here beyond that 6 months in retirement, unless they're part of a corporate transfer or something where they're operating here for a couple of years. And we did have some interest. A number of people in Congress had said, boy, it sounds like a great idea, but no one had the courage to go ahead and introduce legislation that really needs to be done. And then we had the change of parties in the middle of this over the last 4 years, and we did have some traction. But I got featured on CBS Nightly News trying to say, hey, they interviewed a British gentleman who was in the, he had fish and chip shops, very, very, very successful, which he sold out, and he came here wanting to retire here, and he ended up having to buy a rug cleaning business to come in under the E2 visas, which I know you're familiar with, because we did a lot of those over the years. And he said, I don't want to work, I just want to spend my money here. And he said, I pay real estate taxes, so I contribute to the schools and everything else, and I pay sales tax on everything I buy. And he said, why wouldn't they let me stay here and just spend my money? And that's the question I keep posing to a lot of people in Congress. Why would you? And this would soak up a lot of the inventory, because part of the provisions is they have to buy something here, a piece of real estate.
Well, hopefully comprehensive immigration reform will come before our gray hair doesn't grow anymore. Tony, thank you very much for coming in today and talking about this. Ladies and gentlemen, you can Google Tony on the internet. Tony Macaluso, Macaluso, Realty or Realtor, Palm Beach County, Florida. He's all over the internet. You can find him very easily. He is truly a voice for international sales, international real estate, and makes my point exactly that immigration law is in fact an economic development tool, and we need this gray visa or silver visa, whichever vernacular we want to use. Well, thank you very much for coming in, and we'll be right back, folks.
Okay.
Well, welcome back, folks. As you can see, Tony Macaluso is a very interesting character with a whole bunch of very relevant information with regards to immigration and economic development. I'm actually going to have Tony come back on a regular basis and talk about this and use some real-life examples for how we can make the point even more crystal clear. I thank him for agreeing to do that. So now let's go to fireworks and politics. Fireworks and politics this week really is about the war on religion. That's a phrase that Newt Gingrich seems to be using a lot in his stump speeches around the country. But the reality is there really is a war on religion. And I wanted to point out two things this week. Last week, at the National Prayer Breakfast, President Obama had the audacity and the nerve to use it as a political speech instead of for what it really is about, and that's for taking a moment to recognize a greater creator. He claimed that he was Christian. Many people doubt that claim. But he used a parable in the Bible where he said, "For unto whom much is given, much shall be required," to justify his idea that people of higher means need to pay higher taxes. People of higher means already pay the bulk of the taxes in this country, a fact that he conveniently overlooks. People of higher means should be the ones that are distracted and disgusted because almost 48% of the people in this country pay absolutely no federal income tax. President Obama, if you are a Christian and you want to share and everybody should do their fair share, then everybody should do their fair share. And on that subject, I have nothing more to say. But there's another element that has hit the newspapers and is a topic of great conversation, and that is the requirement that religious institutions that have insurances, hospitals, and other clinic-type operations are being forced now to do things against their moral beliefs. And the moral opt-out clause has been weakened significantly, meaning that, and this is taking the issue to the Catholics specifically, meaning that Catholic hospitals and clinics and health institutions and insurance companies need to be able to distribute contraceptive and abortion and other things that make for child rearing more difficult or childbearing more difficult. I am appalled by that, and I'm appalled by Vice President Biden, who sits quiet and has not made any public statement of significance with regards to that, and Speaker Pelosi, who stands up and says she stands with the president even though she's of Italian heritage and Catholic background. You know, the bottom line is that this is the first, really a big assault on the freedom of religion parts of the Constitution, and for the White House through its press secretary to make the statement that there are no constitutional issues here is something somewhat disingenuous. I really encourage the Catholic Church to fight this, take it into the courts, and let's take it to the Supremes and let the Supremes decide on this. In the meantime, I encourage the President to back off on the assault on religion in this country, and we will move on from there. My next topic that I wanted to talk about in fireworks and politics has to do with the former governor of the state of Florida, Jeb Bush, and the current senator in the state of Florida, Marco Rubio. Both have recently come out and have stated in their rhetoric that the GOP platform on immigration needs to soften. Both have made dramatic pleas to the speaking politician, the people on the stump for the president and others in Congress, to soften up the position on what is the largest growing segment of the American population, and a segment that is significantly interested in the outcome of the immigration question in this country. I concur with Senator Rubio, and I suggest that each of you go to do a website on Senator Rubio and get his latest position, the speech that he delivered last week here in Miami on immigration, and review it. Listen to it in detail. I also want to encourage you to look at some of the background from Governor Bush when he was the governor of the state of Florida. And interestingly enough, back in 2007, Governor Bush published a statement or did an interview with Peter Robinson. The program is part of the Hoover Institution's interview series called Uncommon Knowledge. And in that interview, Governor Bush outlined his beliefs with regards to immigration and how it should be viewed in this country. His views on immigration's current domestic agenda and foreign policy challenges faith and politics and the 2007 Republican presidential candidates. Jeb Bush is an American politician and was the 43rd president of Florida, and you'll be surprised to listen to him speak in this interview. The interview will be played in its entirety at the end of this broadcast. It's 3 minutes and 48 seconds on the immigration issue, and I encourage you to stick around and watch it. Governor Bush and Senator Rubio are right on with regards to the rhetoric of the candidates being softened. We talked about this over the last couple of weeks, so I don't need to reiterate. The only candidate that has a softened position on immigration at this point in time is Speaker Gingrich, and his position tracks in very significant manners the position of Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s. So with that said, we're going to move on now to our segment of KOs and Koodoos. Just recently, last week, the newspapers reported that Phil Allen, the director of the Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale, is retiring and is going to spend some time with his family traveling and doing things that he's enjoyed. He has actually been involved in Broward County government for 26 years, where he started out basically as an accountant, a numbers cruncher, and ultimately took the reins on Port Everglades as the head of the port and put in place a 20-year plan for its expansion. If anybody knows the southeast sector of the state of Florida, one knows that the incredible growth of the Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale is directly related to Phil Allen, and I think that it is a good moment to take the time and congratulate a man for a job well done. Hey, incredible kudu. An incredible KO. If you've been following this case down here where a very rich person by the name of John Goodman killed a young man in a vehicular accident where he was, or alleged to have been, driving under the influence. He's a very, very wealthy man, and he argued successfully that the trusts in the perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars set aside for his children should be outside the reach of the parents of the young man that he killed. One of the judges here agreed with him. Until recently. Recently, Mr. Goodman has decided to adopt his girlfriend, who he sleeps with and who he's intimate with, and make her a beneficiary of the trust. Now that has caused the judge to rethink the issue of the trust funds. At any rate, this is an incredible story, a story of great chutzpah, and the adoption of your girlfriend should be set aside for the sham that it is. And finally, I want to take a moment to recognize this kudu, an artist by the name of David Choi, back in 2005, for some stock in Facebook, painted all of the inner walls of Facebook's first office. In the upcoming public offering that Facebook is going to go through, Mr. Choi's stock is reportedly going to be worth in the neighborhood of $200 million. What a great kudu that is. And with that, folks, we'll bring the show to a close. Remember to stay tuned at the end for Governor Bush's video on his position on immigration. And remember that we are, all of us, the residents of a swiftly shrinking globe, where what was once local is fast becoming global, and our decisions and opinions resonate well beyond our own borders. I thank you for joining me each week, your host, Al Zucaro, from the epicenter of the Western Hemisphere, Boca Raton, Florida, in sunny South Palm Beach County, for a pointed look at politics, immigration, culture, and what it means to be a citizen of the world. Good night.
Samuel Huntington, the professor of political science at Harvard. Quote, unlike past immigrants, Mexicans and other Latinos have not assimilated into mainstream U.S. culture, forming instead their own political... You're already shaking your head.
No,
get the reaction shot here.
The guy needs to get out more.
Let me do him the justice of finishing the quotation.
Okay.
The persistent inflow of Hispanic immigrants threatens to divide the United States into two peoples, two cultures, and two languages. Question, is Florida in any way becoming two cultures and two peoples?
No. And Professor Huntington, who I'm sure is a really smart man, needs to truly get out of the zip code of Cambridge. And so does Tom Tancredo. And so do the people that use this, not Dr. Huntington, but politicians that use this as a wedge issue. It's a loser. And if you believe in conservative principles and you want conservatives to win, to implement those principles, to totally disown a group that is the only group that is growing in our country, and as American in their pursuit of the traditional dreams that people pursue here, as any other group, I think we do it at our peril. I mean, it's bad, it's wrong, and it's stupid. And the combination of being incorrect and stupid is just very dangerous in politics.
Let me push you one more time on that one.
Please.
You majored in Latin American Studies at the University of Texas. You're
Yes.
fluent in Spanish. You're married to a Mexican. There's no reason why you would feel, walking around a Cuban neighborhood in Miami, for example,
Right.
that you were in any way an outsider. But let's take somebody of our age
Right.
who grew up in Florida, who
Right.
was born in Florida in the 50s, and now wanders around portions of his own state and feels as though he's the foreigner.
Well, here's the answer to that. I'll give you a specific answer. Marco Rubio, 32-year-old, 34-year-old now, Speaker of the Florida House. He speaks better English than you and I do. He's eloquent. He's downright eloquent. He speaks Spanish fluently. His parents speak halting English. His parents worked hard, 2 jobs. They came with nothing. They worked 2 jobs so their son could go to the University of Florida and then to the University of Florida Law School. They saved their money. They did everything that every immigrant group and people born here, what we expect them to do, to provide for their families. And the pride in their son, when he assumed this responsibility as the first Cuban American to be Florida Speaker of the House, was as American as any other parent. And the notion that somehow we now are changing the rules of the game, that immediately when someone arrives in our country, they have to automatically speak English and automatically assume that they know everything about American culture, when people born in this country don't have very much sense of what our heritage is and what our culture is, I think is wrong. And so, with all due respect to the people that may feel that they're the foreigner in these countries, if they look at the next generation, that assimilation, acculturation is happening just as it did generations ago.